Single mom kisses virgin millionaire during job interview in front of his billionaire mom, but she's shocked when the old woman says, "I'm hiring you to sleep with my son." And that same night, comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Rain lashed violently against the windows of the derelict office building where the 28-year-old single mom and her 4-year-old daughter were sheltering. The little girl coughed incessantly, and each sound tore at the woman's heart. Knowing she didn't have the money for the medicine she needed, they hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days, surviving only on stale bread she'd managed to get from a bakery at the end of the previous day. Her cracked cell phone vibrated in her pocket. It was the social worker, informing her about a job opening as a housekeeper at one of the city's most luxurious mansions. The offer seemed like a miracle for someone who had lost her last job 2 months ago and was facing imminent eviction from their tiny apartment. She looked at her daughter, who was playing silently with a raggedy cloth doll, and felt a mixture of hope and despair. The next morning, she walked nervously through the mansion's marble hallways, her worn shoes echoing in the silent environment. The little girl held her hand tightly, appearing only 2 years old due to the extreme frailty caused by malnutrition and the illness slowly consuming her. The child could barely stand, but she tried to smile at her mother, as if to reassure her. The library where the interview would take place was more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. Huge, dark wood bookshelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with books that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. The 60-year-old billionaire matriarch was seated behind an imposing desk, her piercing eyes observing every movement of the candidate with a disturbing intensity. She immediately noticed that she wasn't alone in the room. In the corner, near the window overlooking perfectly manicured gardens, stood a 30-year-old man whose beauty was so striking he seemed to have stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. His blue eyes contrasted with his dark hair, and there was something in his posture that conveyed a deep sadness, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders. During the formal interview, the matriarch asked direct questions about experience and availability, but her eyes never stopped studying the young mother with a strange curiosity. The son remained completely silent, simply observing the scene with an indecipherable expression. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Then tragedy struck. The little girl, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, tried to approach one of the bookshelves to get a better look at the colorful books, but her weak legs couldn't support her weight. She tripped and fell onto the marble floor with a thud that echoed throughout the library. Instinctively, the mother moved to comfort her, but to her surprise, the millionaire heartthrob was faster. He knelt beside the child with unexpected gentleness, helping her up and checking to see if she was hurt. His gestures were so tender and genuine that they deeply touched the woman's heart, who had never seen a man show so much care for her daughter. In that moment of mutual vulnerability, when he looked up to check if the girl was okay, their eyes met. Something inexplicable happened in the space between them, a connection that went beyond words or rational explanations. Moved by an impulse she couldn't understand, she leaned in and pressed her lips against his in a soft, hesitant kiss. The silence that followed was absolute. The man stood completely still, his eyes wide with surprise, while the matriarch watched the scene with an expression that mixed shock and something that looked like satisfaction. The young mother felt the blood rush to her face, realizing the enormity of what she had just done during a job interview. The billionaire matriarch broke the silence with a low, controlled voice, but her words made the young mother's blood run cold. She wouldn't be hired as a housekeeper, as she had imagined. The proposal that came from the powerful woman's lips was far more intimate and disturbing than anything she could have imagined. The revelation came as a devastating blow. The 30-year-old son, despite all his wealth and heartthrob appearance, had never had a real romantic experience. The matriarch had obsessively controlled every aspect of his life, pushing away any woman who showed genuine interest in him. What she was proposing was an arrangement that would guarantee a substantial amount of money, enough to treat her sick daughter, but would completely compromise the young mother's dignity and moral principles. That same night, the single mother found herself in an impossible position. Sitting on the edge of the bed in the guest room that the matriarch had designated for her, she watched her daughter sleep fitfully, her irregular breathing revealing how much the child was suffering. The medicine she needed cost a fortune, and the doctors had been clear about the urgency of the treatment. The proposal echoed in her mind like a recurring nightmare. Accepting would mean having enough financial resources to save her daughter, but it would represent the complete destruction of everything she believed in about dignity and true love. The matriarch had been brutally direct. She should teach her son the intimacies of a relationship, preparing him for an eventual arranged marriage with a socialite from a traditional family. During the first days of this strange coexistence, she discovered that the mansion was like a gilded cage. Security cameras monitored every hallway, and the staff seemed to report directly to the matriarch about every movement of the residents. The millionaire rarely left his quarters, spending most of his time in the library or walking alone through the extensive gardens of the property. He was completely different from what she had imagined. In the hesitant conversations that began to happen during meals, she discovered that he was a deeply lonely and kind man who had never had the courage to oppose his domineering mother's manipulations. His investments in the stock market had multiplied the family fortune, but all that money seemed to imprison him even more. The first week passed in a strange and uncomfortable routine. During the day, she cared for her daughter and tried to maintain a respectful distance from the man. But during the nights, when the child finally fell asleep, she found herself walking through the gardens of the property. It was always there that he appeared, as if he too were seeking refuge from the suffocating atmosphere of the house. Their conversations began timidly, whispered between the fragrant rose bushes that exuded a sweet aroma in the night air. He talked about the books he read, about the countries he would like to visit, but was never allowed to see. She shared stories about her daughter, about the dreams she had abandoned when she became a single mother. The chemistry between them grew gradually, built on a mutual understanding of what it meant to live under the control of impossible circumstances. The 4-year-old girl, with her natural innocence, seemed to be the only person in the mansion who didn't feel the weight of the constant tension. She played in the gardens with genuine joy, chasing butterflies and talking to the birds as if they were her close friends. The millionaire watched her play with a melancholic smile and gradually began to join them, teaching her about the different flowers and helping her build small castles with the stones in the garden. It was during one of those afternoons that the first real obstacle arose. The matriarch hired a team of private investigators, claiming concern for the security of the property, but in reality, she was watching every movement of the young mother. She feared that the woman would develop genuine feelings for her son and threaten the absolute control she exerted over the family fortune and his personal decisions. The investigators were discreet but omnipresent. Additional cameras were installed in the gardens, and hidden microphones picked up conversations that took place in the hallways. The already tense atmosphere of the mansion became completely claustrophobic, with the constant feeling of being watched and judged at every moment. The second complication exploded when the millionaire's ex-fiancée returned to town. The ambitious socialite had been pushed away years ago by the matriarch, but now she was returning with renewed determination to regain her place. She had discovered the scandalous arrangement through her social connections and was determined to publicly expose the whole situation. The socialite appeared at the mansion during a formal dinner, wearing an expensive dress that highlighted her artificial beauty and calculated manners. Her eyes gleamed with a cold malice as she greeted the matriarch with excessive familiarity and watched the young mother with poorly disguised disdain. She talked about the old days with forced nostalgia, but her words carried subtle threats about embarrassing revelations. Over the following months, the emotional closeness between the single mother and the millionaire continued to grow despite all the obstacles. They developed a silent language made of meaningful glances and delicate gestures. When he helped her care for her sick daughter, their fingers touched briefly, creating an electric current that ran through her entire body. The situation became drastically complicated when the 4-year-old girl became seriously ill during a cold winter night. Her fever rose dangerously, and she needed to be taken immediately to the hospital for emergency surgery that would cost an astronomical sum. The young mother found herself forced to accept more money from the matriarch, deepening her dependence on this toxic relationship that imprisoned her more and more. While waiting for news about the surgery in the most expensive private hospital in the city, she realized how completely dependent she had become on the matriarch's disturbing generosity. Each bill she received seemed to carry an overwhelming moral weight, but when she looked at her daughter fighting for her life, she knew she would make any necessary sacrifice. The girl's surgery was a success, but the recovery would be long and costly. During the 2 weeks she remained hospitalized, the young mother practically lived at the hospital, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair next to her daughter's bed. The millionaire appeared every day, bringing fresh flowers and new toys, demonstrating a genuine affection that deeply moved the exhausted woman. It was during one of those visits that she realized she was genuinely in love with him. It wasn't gratitude for the financial help, nor admiration for his wealth. It was something much deeper and scarier. When he held the small hand of the sleeping child and hummed a lullaby softly, she felt her heart race in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The return to the mansion brought an even more tense atmosphere. The matriarch had discovered her son's constant visits to the hospital and was furious with what she considered an excessive display of affection. During a particularly icy dinner, she made it clear that she expected more concrete results from the arrangement she had proposed, hinting that her patience was running out. The young mother's suffering intensified when she accidentally discovered a sophisticated recording system hidden in her room. The billionaire matriarch had been secretly recording all intimate encounters, planning to use this evidence to blackmail her if she tried to get out of this situation. The discovery came when she noticed a small red light flashing behind an ornate painting on the wall. The revelation that her privacy had been so brutally violated made her nauseous. She realized that there was no escape from this gilded cage. The matriarch had enough material in her hands to destroy her reputation and possibly prevent her from seeing her daughter again. The woman's power and influence extended far beyond the mansion, reaching courts and authorities that could easily be influenced by her fortune. The first minor twist happened when the millionaire accidentally found one of the recordings while looking for a document in his mother's office. The shock of discovering the extent of her manipulations left him completely shaken. For the first time in decades, he confronted the matriarch directly, his voice trembling with anger and disappointment as he demanded explanations. The argument that followed was explosive. The matriarch tried to justify her actions by claiming protection of the family and preservation of the fortune, but he no longer accepted her manipulative excuses. He discovered that his investments in Bitcoin and other ventures had been managed without his real knowledge, and that she controlled his assets through proxies he had signed years ago, when he was still too naive to understand the implications. During this confrontation, the young mother was in the gardens with her daughter, who had finally regained enough strength to play outdoors. The raised voices coming from the library reached them like distant echoes, and she knew that something fundamental was changing in the dynamics of the house. The girl, with her childish insight, commented that the handsome man looked very angry and that maybe he was defending them. The medium twist arose when the investigation by the private detectives revealed something completely unexpected. The young mother had previously worked at the family's company years before she had met them personally. She was a brilliant financial analyst who had discovered significant irregularities in the corporation's accounting books. Her unfair dismissal had been orchestrated by the matriarch herself to cover up these frauds and protect the company's profits. This discovery completely changed the perspective on who was really the victim in this story. The young woman had lost her previous job for trying to do the right thing and had faced years of financial hardship because of the powerful woman's calculated manipulations. The matriarch had recognized her face during the interview and decided to use her desperate situation for her own perverse purposes. The millionaire was devastated to realize that all the important decisions in his life had been based on lies and emotional manipulation. He began to question every memory, every relationship that his mother had sabotaged, every opportunity that she had destroyed, claiming to be protecting his interests. His fortune in dollars and diverse investments now seemed like a chain that tied him to a life he hadn't truly chosen. The sexual tension between the protagonists reached its peak during a stormy night. They met in the library after a particularly difficult day, and the physical proximity combined with the emotional intensity of recent events almost led them to completely surrender to each other. Their hands touched as they flipped through a book, and when he raised his face to look at her, the magnetic attraction between them was undeniable. They were seconds away from breaking all barriers when they were abruptly interrupted by the unexpected arrival of the socialite ex-fiancée. She had used her connections to gain access to the property and appeared in the library like a vengeful apparition, dressed in black and carrying a briefcase full of documents that promised to expose everything to the sensationalist press. The socialite revealed that she had spent months collecting evidence about the scandalous arrangement, including photographs from the private investigators, financial records of the suspicious transactions, and even recordings of phone conversations between the matriarch and her lawyers. She demanded that the millionaire marry her immediately or face the public humiliation of having all the sordid details exposed in the country's most read tabloids. The young mother's internal conflict intensified in the face of this new threat. She realized that her feelings for the millionaire had become genuine and deep, but now she feared that public exposure could affect not only her, but also her innocent daughter, who could grow up scarred by the scandal involving her mother. The socialite's threat created chaos in the mansion. For 3 agonizing days, she remained as an unwelcome guest, spreading poison through seemingly innocent comments and subtle blackmail. The matriarch tried to maintain control of the situation, but for the first time in decades, her plans seemed to be collapsing completely. It was during this period of extreme tension that the 4-year-old girl, playing in the gardens, made an observation that would change everything. With the innocence typical of a child, she commented aloud about the strange conversations she heard from the adults through the open windows. Her spontaneous words revealed that she had overheard the matriarch talking on the phone about important papers hidden in the safe, mentioning something about the true will of the millionaire's father. The child's revelation awakened a suspicion that had been dormant in the millionaire's mind for years. He vaguely remembered whispered conversations between his parents when he was little, discussions about important documents that should be protected. Confronted with this new clue, he decided to investigate the matriarch's private safe, using knowledge about the combination that he had secretly observed years ago. During a silent dawn while the house slept, he managed to open the old safe hidden behind a painting in the main office. What he found inside was devastating. Documents that proved that the matriarch was not his biological mother, but rather his stepmother, who had taken control of the family fortune after the premature death of his father and his real mother. The real will, sealed and hidden for decades, revealed a surprising condition. The entire fortune would be left to the son, with the specific requirement that he marry for true love, not for convenience or family arrangement. The document included a detailed clause on how to identify a genuine relationship based on characteristics that the father had observed in his happy marriage with his first wife. The discovery that he had been deceived about his own identity and inheritance left the millionaire completely distraught. He realized that his stepmother had built a lifetime of lies to maintain access to his assets and wealth, including his investments in stocks and funds that generated substantial dividends. She had even manipulated his feelings about his biological mother, making him believe that she had abandoned the family. The final confrontation happened the next morning, during breakfast. With the will in his hands and the truth finally revealed, the millionaire bravely faced his stepmother for the first time in his adult life. His voice didn't tremble when he demanded explanations about decades of manipulation and control, and declared that he was immediately taking control of his inheritance and his life. The matriarch desperately tried to maintain her version of events, claiming that she had done everything out of love and protection, but the evidence was irrefutable. The will was duly sealed and recognized, and even included provisions for situations of mismanagement by guardians or caregivers. She realized that her empire of lies was collapsing irreversibly. During this dramatic revelation, the socialite ex-fiancé realized that she had lost any chance of access to the family fortune. Without the support of the matriarch, and with the millionaire taking full control of his assets, her vengeful plans became irrelevant. In a scene loaded with irony, she swallowed her threats and left silently, realizing that she had bet on the wrong horse during all these years. The millionaire then turned to the young mother, who had observed the whole scene in silence, holding her daughter in her arms. With a firm but emotional voice, he declared his love for her in a way that left no doubt about the sincerity of his feelings. It was no longer the circumstances forced by the matriarch that united them, but a genuine connection that had grown through shared suffering and mutual understanding. The little 4-year-old girl, finally healthy and radiant, smiled in her mother's arms and stretched her little arms towards the man who had become a father figure in her life. It was she who symbolically sealed the union of the family they were forming, with her natural and affectionate acceptance of who genuinely cared about her well-being. The resolution of the problems came quickly once the truth was established. The matriarch faced the legal consequences of her manipulations and financial frauds, including the illegal administration of the inheritance and the irregularities in the company's books that had cost the protagonist her job years ago. The family's lawyers ensured that she was held accountable for every questionable transaction and every documented lie. With full control of his fortune and freedom to make his own choices, the millionaire immediately provided the best medical treatment available for the girl, ensuring that she had access to specialized care that would ensure her complete health. He also made sure to repair the damage caused to the young mother's career, offering her an executive position in the family company where she could use her genuine analytical talents. The story culminated 6 months later, when they married in an intimate ceremony in the gardens of the same mansion that had been the scene of so much suffering. The little girl scattered rose petals along the path, running happily among the guests, who had been carefully chosen for being genuine people who wanted their happiness. The satisfying ending showed the two protagonists building a life based on mutual love, honesty, and genuine respect. The child flourished in a healthy family environment, surrounded by the affection of two adults who had learned that true value was not in material wealth, but in the ability to face adversity together and create something beautiful from shared suffering. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.